Brother, when you remember, you feel alive. That's it. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I've been sitting there.
It was supposed to be just another Sunday morning service at Household of Faith Church in Benton, Arkansas. The congregation settled in, expecting Pastor Bob Joyce to deliver his usual heartfelt sermon about faith and redemption. But what happened next will go down as one of the most shocking moments in music history. Bob Joyce, now 89 years old, stepped up to the pulpit with something different in his eyes. Not the usual gentle warmth his congregation had come to love. This was raw. This was pain. This was a man who had carried a secret so heavy it was literally killing him. His voice started to shake as he gripped the sides of the podium. "I need to tell you something," he said, his words cutting through the church like a knife. "Something I should have said a long time ago." The congregation leaned forward. Something was wrong. This wasn't their pastor's usual cadence. This wasn't rehearsed. This was a man on the edge of breaking. "For over 40 years, I've lived with a burden that's eaten me alive," Bob continued, his voice cracking with emotion. "I've prayed about it. I've wrestled with it. I've asked God to show me the right path. And today I can't carry it anymore." He paused, tears streaming down his weathered face. The church was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. "My name is Bob Joyce. I am your pastor. I am a servant of God. But I am also..." His voice broke completely. "I am also the man the world knew as Elvis Presley." The gasps echoed through the sanctuary. Some people started crying. Others sat in stunned silence. A few got up and walked out, unable to process what they'd just heard. But Bob wasn't finished. The floodgates had opened, and decades of pain came pouring out. "I didn't fake my death for fame. I didn't do it for money. I did it because I had to. Because staying Elvis Presley meant dying for real, and I wasn't ready to leave this world. Not when I'd finally found my purpose." He talked about the crushing weight of fame, the isolation, the drugs that nearly killed him multiple times, the people who wanted to control him, exploit him, use him up until there was nothing left. "August 16th, 1977, wasn't the day Elvis died," he said, his voice gaining strength. "It was the day Elvis was set free. Free to find God, free to serve others, free to become the man I was always meant to be." The confession kept coming. Bob described the elaborate plan, the people who helped him disappear, the agony of watching his family grieve a death that never happened. He talked about Lisa Marie growing up without her father, not because he was dead, but because he was a coward who chose his own peace over her pain. "I've watched from the shadows as Priscilla carried the burden of my choice. I've seen how my selfishness destroyed my daughter's life." His hands trembled as he continued. "But I can't die with this secret. I can't meet my maker with this deception on my soul. So I'm telling you now, all of you, the truth I should have told 46 years ago." The church erupted. Some people shouted, "Hallelujah!" Others screamed, "Liar!" The scene was chaos, but Bob Joyce stood there, finally unburdened, finally free. "I know what this means," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I know what I've lost. I know what I've cost others. But I also know that truth sets you free. And for the first time in decades, I can breathe." He stepped back from the pulpit, a broken man who had finally found his voice. But this confession, it was just the beginning, because what Bob Joyce revealed next would make this bombshell look like a whisper. The moment Bob Joyce's confession hit the internet, one person's phone started ringing off the hook. Priscilla Presley's phone. And according to Bob's explosive revelation, she didn't just know the truth. She'd been fighting to keep it buried for decades. 3 days after I made my confession, Bob told his stunned congregation, his voice still shaking, Priscilla called me. Not through her people, not through lawyers. She called me directly, and what she said, it changed everything. Bob's hands gripped the pulpit tighter as he continued. She was furious, angrier than I'd ever heard her. She screamed at me for 20 minutes straight, called me selfish, called me a coward, said I'd destroyed everything she'd worked for. But here's what nobody knew. This wasn't their first conversation, not even close. Priscilla has known the truth for years, Bob confessed, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. She's known since 1982. She found me, she tracked me down, and she made me promise to never, ever tell anyone who I really was. The church erupted again, but Bob pushed through the noise. She told me that Lisa Marie was finally healing, that the Presley name meant something, that revealing the truth would destroy not just her life, but our daughter's life. And like a fool, I believed her. But the phone call 3 days ago? That was different. That was Priscilla Presley, at her most desperate and most dangerous. She didn't just ask me to stay quiet this time, Bob revealed, his voice gaining strength. She threatened me, said she'd destroy my church, my reputation, everything I'd built as Bob Joyce. She said she had lawyers ready to prove I was a fraud, a con man taking advantage of grieving Elvis fans. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Priscilla was threatening to destroy Bob Joyce by claiming he wasn't Elvis Presley, when she knew damn well he was. But that's not the worst part, Bob continued, his voice cracking again. Bob's confession revealed the devastating truth about Priscilla's public statements over the years. Every time she dismissed the Bob Joyce rumors, every time she said people needed to let Elvis rest, she wasn't protecting his memory. She was protecting her own secrets. Priscilla built an empire on my death, Bob said, his voice filled with decades of suppressed anger. Graceland, the merchandising, the movies, the books, all of it was built on the story of Elvis dying young, dying tragic, dying a victim of his own success. But if Elvis didn't die, if he chose to disappear, if he abandoned his family to find God, that story crumbles. And with it, everything Priscilla had built. She begged me to recant, Bob revealed. Offered me money, offered to set up a fund for my church, said she'd make sure I was taken care of for the rest of my life if I just say it was all a lie, that I was confused, that I was seeking attention. The manipulation was breathtaking. Priscilla wasn't just asking Bob to stay quiet. She was asking him to destroy his own credibility, his own reputation, to protect hers. But I couldn't do it anymore, Bob said, his voice breaking with emotion. I couldn't let Lisa Marie's memory be tainted by lies. I couldn't let my daughter think her father was a drug-addicted failure when the truth was so much more complicated. The final blow came when Bob revealed what Priscilla said at the end of that devastating phone call. She told me that if I didn't fix this, if I didn't make it go away, she'd make sure the world knew what kind of father I really was, what kind of man abandons his family to play preacher. Priscilla Presley, the woman who'd spent decades as the grieving widow, the devoted keeper of Elvis's flame, was now threatening to destroy the man she once loved to protect the lie she'd helped create. But Bob Joyce wasn't backing down. Not this time. I told her the truth was out now, that I was done being her prisoner, done being afraid of what people would think. The war between Bob Joyce and Priscilla Presley had begun, and what came next would shock the world even more than his confession. After decades of silence, after years of carrying the weight of a secret that nearly destroyed him, Bob Joyce was finally ready to tell the whole truth. Not just who he was, but why Elvis Presley had to die. And the reason? It's darker than anyone could have imagined. People think I faked my death because I was tired of being famous, Bob said, his voice steady now, strengthened by the burden finally lifting. They think it was about the pressure, the drugs, the lifestyle. But that's not the truth. The truth is I was going to be killed, for real this time. The church fell silent again. This wasn't about escaping fame anymore. This was about escaping death. By 1977, I owed the wrong people too much money, Bob continued, his hands gripping the pulpit. Not just gambling debts, not just the colonel's schemes. I'm talking about dangerous people. People who didn't care if I was the king of rock and roll. They cared about the millions of dollars I couldn't pay back. Bob's confession revealed a side of Elvis's final years that nobody knew. The drugs weren't just about numbing the pain of fame. They were about numbing the terror of knowing that every day could be his last. I was getting death threats daily. My phones were tapped. People were following Lisa Marie to school, following Priscilla to the grocery store. They weren't just coming after me, they were coming after my family. The desperation in Bob's voice was palpable. This wasn't a man who chose to abandon his family. This was a man who was trying to save them. Dr. Nick knew. He was the one who came up with the plan. He said the only way to keep everyone safe was to make Elvis Presley disappear permanently. Not just hide, disappear. And the only way to do that was to die. But here's the part that makes it even more tragic. The plan wasn't just Bob's idea, it was a family decision. Priscilla knew, Bob revealed, his voice cracking with emotion. She knew about the threats. She knew about the debt. She knew that if Elvis stayed alive, none of us would be safe. She agreed to the plan. She helped plan my funeral. The betrayal wasn't Bob abandoning his family. It was Priscilla later pretending she'd been abandoned. We agreed I'd stay dead for 5 years, long enough for the heat to die down, for the debts to be written off, for the dangerous people to move on to other targets. Then I'd come back. We'd reunite the family. We'd start over somewhere safe. But 5 years turned into 10. 10 turned into 20. And before Bob knew it, he'd been dead longer than he'd been alive. Every year I'd call Priscilla. Every year she'd say it wasn't safe yet, that Lisa Marie was doing well, that revealing the truth would only hurt her, that the Presley estate needed more time to stabilize. What Bob didn't realize was that Priscilla had found something she'd never had when Elvis was alive. Control. Complete, total control over his legacy, his money, his story. She'd built an empire on my death, Bob said, his voice filled with decades of suppressed rage. And she wasn't about to let me come back and destroy it. The most heartbreaking part of Bob's confession wasn't about the money or the fame. It was about Lisa Marie. My daughter died thinking I was a failure, thinking I was weak, thinking I chose drugs over her love. She spent her whole life trying to live up to a ghost, trying to honor a father she thought had abandoned her for his addictions. Bob's voice broke completely as he continued. Lisa Marie struggled with drugs her whole life because she thought it was in her DNA. She thought she was destined to fail because her father did. She died carrying shame that wasn't hers to carry. But the final revelation was the most shocking of all. I tried to tell her, Bob whispered, tears streaming down his face. In 2020, I reached out to Lisa Marie directly. I told her who I was. I told her I was her father. I told her I was alive and I was sorry. The congregation held its breath. She hung up on me, called me a sick old man trying to profit off her pain. She died thinking I was a fraud, her own father, and she died thinking I was just another con artist. Bob's confession revealed the ultimate tragedy, a father who faked his death to save his family, only to lose them forever because of that choice. I became Bob Joyce because Elvis Presley was a dead man walking. But in saving Elvis, I killed the father Lisa Marie needed. I killed the husband Priscilla deserved. I killed the man I was supposed to be. The weight of 46 years of regret, guilt, and lost love crashed down on Bob Joyce as he stood before his congregation, finally free to tell the truth, but too late to save the people he'd destroyed trying to protect. I'm telling you this now because I'm dying, Bob said, his voice barely audible. The doctors say I have months, maybe weeks, and I can't meet my maker carrying this lie. I can't face Lisa Marie in heaven knowing she died hating a father who never stopped loving her. The truth was finally out. But the cost of that truth, it was everything Bob Joyce had left to lose. The moment Bob Joyce's full confession hit the airwaves, the world exploded. This wasn't just a celebrity rumor anymore. This was a dying man's final testimony. And the ripple effects are tearing through Memphis, Graceland, and what's left of the Presley legacy like a hurricane. Within hours of the confession going viral, Priscilla Presley's legal team issued an emergency statement. But here's what shocked everyone. They didn't deny Bob's claims. Instead, they threatened him with defamation lawsuits, demanded he retract his statements, and warned that further revelations would result in severe legal consequences. Why would you threaten someone for lying unless they were telling the truth? The Presley estate went into full damage control mode. Trading was suspended on Elvis-related merchandise. Tours of Graceland were temporarily halted. Licensing deals worth millions of dollars were suddenly in jeopardy. Because if Elvis didn't die in 1977, if he chose to abandon his family, then the entire foundation of the Presley empire crumbles. But the fans? The fans are divided like never before. Half of them feel vindicated. They've spent decades believing Elvis was still alive, and now they have confirmation from the man himself. They're flooding Bob Joyce's church, camping outside, holding vigils, singing Elvis songs through the night. For them, this isn't betrayal, it's resurrection. The other half feel destroyed. They've mourned Elvis for 46 years. They've visited his grave, bought his records, kept his memory alive, and now they're being told it was all based on a lie? That their grief was manufactured? That they've been played for fools by the very people they trusted to honor his legacy? Social media is a war zone. #Elvis lied is trending alongside #Elvis lives. Graceland's social media accounts are flooded with angry comments demanding answers. Priscilla Presley's Instagram has been shut down after receiving thousands of messages calling her a fraud, a liar, a manipulator who built her fortune on deception. But the most heartbreaking response? It's coming from Lisa Marie's friends and family. They're revealing that Lisa Marie had confided in them about the strange phone call in 2020, about an old man claiming to be her father, about how it had sent her into a spiral of depression and drug use because part of her wondered if it could be true. Lisa Marie died questioning everything, one close friend revealed. She spent her last years wondering if her father had really abandoned her, if he was out there somewhere, watching her struggle and choosing not to help. The guilt is eating Bob Joyce alive, but he's not backing down. In a follow-up statement from his hospital bed, because yes, the 89-year-old man is now hospitalized from the stress of his confession, Bob issued a final plea. I know I've destroyed lives. I know I've shattered dreams. I know I've broken hearts that were already broken. But I couldn't die with this lie on my soul. I couldn't face my daughter in heaven knowing she thought I was weak, when the truth was, I was just afraid. He's asking for forgiveness, not just from his fans, but from his family, from Priscilla, despite their war, from Lisa Marie's memory, from everyone whose life was built around the myth he helped create. But forgiveness might be the one thing Bob Joyce can't find. Because how do you forgive someone for stealing 46 years of truth? How do you forgive someone for letting you grieve a lie? The legal battles are just beginning. The emotional fallout will last generations. And Bob Joyce? He's running out of time to make things right. But he's done something that nobody expected. He's given the world a choice. You can keep believing the beautiful lie that Elvis died young, tragic, and legendary. Or you can accept the ugly truth that he lived long, cowardly, and broken. The question is, which story can you live with? Because now that the truth is out, there's no going back. For anyone. This story is still unfolding. What do you think about Bob Joyce's shocking confession? Are you Team Bob or Team Priscilla? Drop your thoughts below, and if you want the full breakdown of Lisa Marie's final recordings about her father, smash that subscribe button because that video drops tomorrow.